I have not listened to all of the DeSean Jackson, LeSean McCoy, Chip Kelly podcast.
Yeah, I
that
did.
is out today. I'm
it.
about 60% of the way through. Was listening to it before the show, but I thought there were some interesting nuggets in there. What is your general takeaway on that conversation?
It was awesome. I mean, I wish I could have had that. I wish I could have heard that in 2014. It could have helped, or in 2015 for LeSean, it could have helped inform my coverage.
I mean, I've been trying to tell you some of those things for a long time, but that's okay.
No, I mean directly from them.
I know that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've heard this stuff too. Okay.
Okay.
I think some of the stuff was pretty damning for Chip. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like the Rock Carmichael anecdote, that's just wrong. In my opinion.
For those of you who haven't read it, this is Chip Kelly calls Rock Carmichael into the office, and according to LeSean McCoy, tells him he needs to be more presentable and needs to have a haircut more like Shady, as opposed to his, which was a little bit more grown out.
Yeah. So yes. So now some of the stuff like DeSean took umbrage to Chip Kelly saying on the first day that there's no starters and everyone has to kind of earn their role. Like that's just what new coaches do.
That's more about the message to the team as opposed to the star players, right?
So, look, I understand there's multiple sides to every story. I get that. But when you hear LeSean, you hear DeSean, and those are two high-profile guys. And, of course, like they were both jettisoned by Chip. So there are not it's like when my grandmother tells me I'm handsome, right? Like she's not an objective narrator, okay? But at the same time, like LeSean and DeSean, their view on this is firsthand, and it's completely valid because it's like their experience. And then they get Jason Peters on the phone, and like Jason Peters,
I haven't gotten there yet, but yeah,
okay, his experience, like these are all valid. So I don't think anything's black and white. I mean, there's nuance to a lot, but there's stuff that was brought up there that is very concerning, and that shows you why Jeffrey Lurie fired Chip after in the middle of his third season, after 2 10-win years, because there was stuff in there that clearly was not going to cut it, and there's a way of treating players that's very important. I mean, it's funny, like Jeff Mail catches such a stray there. Did you get that part?
That was very funny.
Yeah. So some of the stuff. And then there's stuff that like I got to stop like fact checking as I listened to it. They kept saying Jeremy Maclin. DeSean kept saying Jeremy Maclin. He had 2 touchdowns in the Raiders game. He was hurt that year. In the Saints game, he got targeted. He was hurt that year. Like he did not play in that. But there's also stuff there that Jeremy Maclin gets, or I'm sorry, DeSean Jackson, doesn't go to the exit meeting with Chip Kelly that year. I haven't gotten to the part yet about the gang allegations, but I'm eager to hear that. And yeah, I definitely think those 2 guys are reliable, or they are, like, their words are valid. They were 2 of the they were the 2 most high profile players who were sent packing. I mean, Nick Foles and Evan Mathis were in there too, but the DeSean Jackson cut was a major turning point there. The LeSean McCoy trade was a major turning point there. And I've been on record saying this, and I stand by this. I thought Chip as a coach, like as a, putting the offense together, was innovative, was clearly successful for those first 2 years. I thought he did a really bad job with personnel. And I think that he inherited a team that was talented. But I also, like, I hear people say the Chip Kelly tenure, like, set the Eagles back. They won a Super Bowl 2 years later. And they won it in part with guys who, like, Chip advocated to bring in, like Malcolm Jenkins. So
yeah, I mean, I would say if you parse that roster, but from Chip influence, I think it would be pretty low.
I mean, Jeff Stoutland, right? You can go like
sure.
there's
honestly, Jeff Stoutland is probably his biggest legacy.
Yeah,
but positively,
and also like not for nothing, but the coaching staff and Nick Foles would tell you there were things that were implemented in the Eagles offense in 2017 that came from Chip's system.
Sure, and DeSean Jackson talked about some of the plays, like, he
had the best season of his career.
Right.
Like LeSean and DeSean both had the best seasons of their career in that offense. 2013 was the best for both of them. But coaching is not just what you do on Sundays. There's interpersonal parts to this, and clearly that was an issue. And the GM part of the personnel control of it, I don't think he did well with, and clearly the interpersonal part of it, he did not do well with. And so it's not enough that you put your team in position to go 10-6 and 10-6 and back-to-back years. It's how you treat the people in the locker room, how the locker room feels about the leadership structure in place, and then also the team you put together. And I've said this in the past, like Howie Roseman, I think, is a really skilled football executive. And the shame that I saw in this is that I actually think Howie, if Chip embraced Howie, then I think their skill sets could have complemented each other, right? Because I think Chip could take the personnel that he had and found a way to maximize it, which he did in 2013. And actually, he didn't have much of an imprint on like the 2013 roster. A lot of it was inherited, right? You couldn't go through it. By 2015, he got rid of a lot of these guys, and I think it was almost like the system was the star and not the players were the star. And I will always be players over anything else, like players over scheme, players over culture, like players win. And I don't think they recognize that enough.
Yeah, I think it the way that they talk about it, it's unfortunate that it is like Chip Kelly turned into be such a caricature of the fear of hiring a quote unquote college coach, right? Like you've got these guys in their young 20s who are professionals and who are being paid more than you are, and it's not the power imbalance that you might have had in college that you were used to. And so for you to say you're going to be monitoring they're joking about like you're going to be monitoring Jason Peters's like sleep habits and like urine, like that's not going to happen. And some of that stuff and like the telling Shady to wear the different colored socks and the Rock Carmichael thing, like that stuff it's just not going to fly. But also and they talk about like the uncomfortability he had with black people from their perspective. That's their perspective, right? But also, regardless of race, like his uncomfort with having direct conversations with guys, like that's not great. So like a lot of the interpersonal stuff, it was definitely true. And the one thing that Shady brings up, which I remember very vividly, was the Riley Cooper thing. He handled that so poorly. Yeah, and Shady talks about it like. He makes Riley Cooper get up in front of the team, apologize, and then sends him away for a week. And then he doesn't want to deal with it when they come back. Like he doesn't want Jason Peters talking to him about it. And by the way, when he sent him away, it wasn't like he went to some like re-education place to like, learn a little bit more about his biases and all these things. He just went home. He went home to his parents' house in Florida for a week. Like it was like a vacation. And I remember like working in the building at the time, like, this is ridiculous. Yeah. What is going on? And then, of course, makes it through the season. They sign him to a, short-sighted contract. But I mean, imagine being a young black player in that locker room and going through that and already feeling some kind of way about Chip Kelly. Like, you probably would not like that person.
Yeah, I would say any player, right? Like because this is the point I made then, and I feel even stronger about it now. New coaches, almost by definition, have a certain amount of equity, and like Chip used his equity on Riley Cooper. And I said then, like, is this where you want to like use your equity? And I thought that if I think the comparison was made at the time that he gave like LeGarrette Blount a second chance in his first game as Oregon's coach, and that worked out well. I think they were two totally different things, because like this is how the other players in the locker room felt.
Well, it was interesting the way Shady talked about it, and I remember this being the thing at the time because Shady and Riley Cooper were friends, like they got along, and so Shady was like, I didn't think that he was a racist. I wanted to have this conversation with him, and then we have the meeting, and he leaves. I don't get to even talk to him, and then like we're not supposed to talk about it after that. Like that's not healthy.
Yeah. Now that I agree, so that's where I think the interpersonal part definitely. I'm with you there. The one thing I will, I don't want to say push back on, but when you talked about like the sleep monitoring and the hydration monitoring, I will say to a certain extent that's an example of the first person through the wall always gets hurt in the sense that a lot of that stuff happens now and like players embrace it. there's much more sophistication.
And this is where like the nuance to like DeSean goes into the office and says, I'm not doing this. And Chip is like, well, this is in service of getting you, like that's true. And there's probably just a better way to do it.
Yeah. Like there's much more sophistication. Like I vividly remember, there was a time DeMarco Murray wasn't practicing because of his load levels. Okay. And Malcolm Jenkins comes over and he grabs a chair from the press conference area and he gives it to DeMarco and he's like, you might as well just sit down then. Because at the time it was like, why is this guy not practicing on the second day of training camp? Now you fast forward to 2023, the Eagles don't have practice the day after their first day of training camp. Like there are things in terms of hydration, things in terms of sleep, things in terms of, you think back to the cafeteria when you were there, like Fast Food Fridays, and I'm not in the cafeteria anymore, but now there's like color coordination for everything. Like don't eat this, eat this, have a certain amount of this. So it might be like the requirement of it might be a little much, but I also think that some of that stuff, it was done in the service of the players, and the Eagles were a little ahead of their time. And actually, I mean, I've spoken to like Jeffrey Lurie about this. There are things that the Eagles still use now that were brought forth by Chip Kelly that they weren't using back then. But the interpersonal stuff and the player personnel stuff, those are strikes against him on his resume for sure.
We all silly like the mayor.